The lights just dropped, not the dramatic dim that fans expect before a superstar's music hits. This was different, sudden, absolute, the kind of darkness that feels heavy. Like the arena itself stopped breathing. The crowd noise didn't explode into cheers or chants, it collapsed into confusion. Thousands of people frozen mid-reaction, unsure if this was a mistake or a moment about to change everything. No music followed, no countdown, no familiar sound to guide their emotions. Just silence, thick, uncomfortable silence. Somewhere in that darkness, heavy footsteps echoed. Slow, deliberate. Each step landed with purpose. Like a heartbeat returning after a long pause, cameras searched blindly, catching only shadows and flickers of nervous faces in the crowd. Then it happened. Pyro erupted without warning. Not celebratory, violent. Sharp bursts of fire tore through the darkness, illuminating a single figure at the entrance ramp. She stood there, wrapped in a long coat that moved like it had a will of its own. The flames reflected off the leather, off her eyes, off a face that carried history without needing to say a word. She didn't raise her arms. She didn't smile. She didn't rush. She just walked. And somehow, that walk said more than any theme song ever could. The arena understood before the commentators did, before the cameras zoomed in, before social media caught up. There was a feeling deep and instinctive that this wasn't a return built for applause. This was unfinished business stepping back into the light. Fans reacted in waves. Some screamed her name, voices cracking with disbelief. Others stood frozen, hands covering mouths, memories rushing back all at once. A few didn't cheer at all. They stared, tense, because they remembered how things ended last time. They remembered the injuries, the rumors, the quiet disappearance that never got an explanation. As she reached the ring, the silence returned. No chants, no boos, just awareness. She stopped at the edge of the apron and looked out not at the ring, but at the crowd, at the people who had supported her, doubted her, forgotten her, and never stopped talking about her all at once. Slowly, she removed the coat. The gear underneath wasn't flashy. No new colors. No rebrand. It was familiar, almost defiant. A reminder that she hadn't come back to reinvent herself. She had come back to reclaim something. She stepped into the ring and stood dead center. The lights finally came up fully, revealing a face calm but scarred by time. Not physically, emotionally. A face that had seen the cost of walking away and the risk of walking back in. Somewhere backstage, a monitor flickered. A hand tightened into a fist. A conversation stopped mid-sentence. Because in that moment, one truth became undeniable. The arena wasn't just shaken by her entry. It was about to be changed by what followed. Once the shock settled, the noise came back, but it wasn't unified. The reaction split the arena into emotional fault lines. Cheers collided with stunned silence. Chants tried to start, failed, and tried again under different names. It wasn't disrespect. It was overload. Everyone was processing the same thought from different angles. She was supposed to be a chapter that ended. Some fans felt vindicated. They had defended her during the long absence, arguing online, rewatching old matches, insisting her story wasn't finished. For them, this moment felt personal, like being proven right after years of doubt. Tears rolled down faces that never expected to cry at a wrestling show. Others felt conflicted. They remembered the chaos she left behind, the interrupted rivalries, the titles vacated, the unanswered questions. To them, her return wasn't heroic. It was unsettling. A reminder that wounds they thought healed were about to be reopened. And then there were the younger fans, the ones who only knew her through clips and whispered legends. They watched the older crowd react and realized they were witnessing something bigger than a comeback. This was history walking back into the present. In the front row, a fan held up a handmade sign. It wasn't flashy, just 3 words written unevenly. "You owe us." A few seats down, another sign read, "We never left." She saw both. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes did. They lingered, absorbed, accepted. She nodded once, not in agreement, not in apology, but acknowledgement. As if to say, I know. Social media exploded before she even spoke. Clips looped endlessly. Slow motion replays of her walk, her stare, the moment the pyro hit. Opinions hardened instantly. Some called it the greatest surprise in years. Others accused the company of rewriting history, of pretending pain didn't exist. Inside the ring, she finally lifted the microphone. She didn't speak right away. The pause stretched, long enough to make people uncomfortable again. Long enough to remind them that she controlled the pace now. When she did speak, her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. I didn't come back for a moment, she said. I came back for the truth. The crowd reacted instantly, but she raised a hand, stopping them. Another unexpected move. Another reminder that this return followed no script they recognized. She spoke of absence without excuses, of silence without blame, of how leaving saved her and how coming back terrified her. Every sentence felt deliberate, like it had been rehearsed not for television, but for herself. The crowd leaned in. Even the skeptics listened. Because beneath the spectacle, beneath the lights and noise, there was something raw happening. A conversation between a performer and an audience that had grown without each other and now had to decide if they could still meet in the middle. And somewhere deep in the arena, beneath cheers and doubts alike, a question echoed. Was this the beginning of redemption, or the opening of a war no one was ready to fight again? While the arena buzzed with emotion, Backstage told a different story. The moment her face appeared on the monitors, conversations stopped. Laughter faded. Smiles froze halfway into place. Some people leaned closer to the screen. Others turned away, pretending not to care. No one was neutral. Veterans exchanged looks heavy with memory. They remembered locker room tension, creative clashes, nights when her presence alone shifted the energy of an entire show. For some, she had been a leader. For others, a storm that never announced itself before hitting. A younger superstar stood near the curtain, arms crossed tightly. This was the woman whose shadow she had built her entire rise around. The spot she currently occupied, the entrance music, the camera angles, the spotlight had once belonged to someone else. And now that someone else was back, producers whispered urgently. Plans adjusted on the fly. Segments were shortened. Meetings postponed. A return like this didn't just change tonight's show, it rewrote weeks of preparation. You could feel the ripple effects spreading, unseen but powerful. In a private room down the hall, a former rival watched silently. No anger on her face. No joy either. Just calculation. She knew better than anyone what it meant to stand across the ring from her again. Matches weren't just physical with her, they were psychological. She didn't just try to win. She tried to expose. A phone buzzed. Then another. Messages from journalists, from friends, from people who hadn't reached out in years. Everyone wanted a reaction, a quote, a confirmation of how they felt. Most ignored them. One voice finally broke the silence backstage. A low, almost amused laugh. She picked the perfect moment, someone said. Not admiration, not insult, just acknowledgement of strategy. Because even now, her timing was surgical. There was also fear unspoken but present. Not fear of losing matches, but fear of losing control. Her return meant unpredictability. Stories that couldn't be neatly contained. Emotions that didn't follow marketing plans. And yet, beneath the tension, there was something else. Relief. Some people had missed this feeling, the electricity of not knowing what would happen next. Of being forced to rise to a higher level because complacency was no longer an option. She didn't just return to take a spot. She returned to demand evolution. As she walked back through the curtain later, eyes followed her from every corner. She didn't acknowledge most of them, not out of arrogance, but focus. She knew what waited ahead, conversations that wouldn't be comfortable, rivalries that would get personal, truths that couldn't stay buried. Someone finally spoke to her directly. A simple, careful sentence. Didn't think we'd see you again. She paused, looked back, and replied softly, neither did I. Backstage exhaled, but not in relief, in anticipation, because everyone understood now. Her return wasn't just about what happened in the ring. It was about everything that was about to unravel behind it. Outside the arena, the world reacted faster than anyone could manage. Headlines clashed with each other, each trying to define what her return meant. Was it redemption? Revenge? A carefully crafted illusion? Every outlet chose its angle, but none could fully capture the truth because even she didn't yet know what this comeback would demand. At home, her family watched quietly. No cheering, no celebration, just attention. They had lived the other side of the story. The nights when painkillers replaced sleep. The mornings when doubt arrived before confidence. They remembered the version of her that didn't walk with purpose, but with caution. The one who questioned whether the love of the crowd was worth the cost of their silence. A message arrived from someone important. Simple. Private. I saw you. No judgment. No advice. Just acknowledgement. And for a moment, that mattered more than the roar of the crowd ever could. Her name trended everywhere, but not everyone used it kindly. Old accusations resurfaced. Past decisions were dissected without context. Moments of weakness were reframed as character flaws. Fame, she knew, always demanded a price, but this time, she was choosing to pay it consciously. In the quiet after the show, she sat alone. Gear still on. Makeup half removed. The adrenaline faded, replaced by something heavier. Responsibility. Coming back meant more than performing. It meant facing expectations she didn't ask for, but carried anyway. Fans projected their own stories onto her return: healing, empowerment, justice. She felt the weight of all of it. And then there was legacy. Not titles, not records, but memory. How would this version of her be remembered? As someone who returned too late, too angry, or someone brave enough to confront the parts of her story that never made it to television? She replayed the moment in her head: the silence, the pyro, the walk. It looked powerful from the outside, but inside, it had been fragile. One wrong step, one hesitation, and the illusion would have cracked. Yet it didn't, because beneath the spectacle was something real: acceptance of uncertainty. She wasn't back because she had all the answers. She was back because she finally stopped running from the questions. A knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. Opportunity waited. Conflict waited. Growth waited. She stood, taking one last look in the mirror. Not searching for confidence, but checking for honesty. The woman looking back wasn't the same one who left. And that, she realized, was the most dangerous thing of all. By morning, the moment had already been simplified, shortened, turned into thumbnails and captions. Biggest return ever. Shock of the year. The viral machine did what it always did: reduced complexity into something easy to consume. But the truth lived between the frames. People thought the story was about her return, about the coat, the pyro, the walk. They argued about reactions, about who benefited most, about what came next in the ring. What they missed was quieter. The real impact wasn't the noise, it was the shift. Backstage dynamics had changed overnight. Confidence had been challenged. Comfort zones disrupted. The future felt unstable, and for the first time in a long while, alive. She watched the clips herself later, not with pride, not with regret, with curiosity, because she understood something now that she hadn't before. Moments don't define legacies, responses do. Her shocking entry wasn't a statement of dominance. It was an invitation to conflict or to truth, to unfinished conversations that demanded resolution. Fans would cheer or boo. Rivals would step forward. Media would speculate endlessly. But beneath all of it, there was a quieter victory. She had returned on her own terms, without pretending the past didn't exist. And that changed everything. The arena had been shaken, yes, but not by spectacle alone. It was shaken by honesty, by the realization that sometimes The most powerful comeback isn't about reclaiming what was lost, but redefining why it mattered in the first place. As the noise faded and the moment settled into history, one thought lingered longer than the shock. She wasn't back to repeat her story. She was back to finish it, even if the ending made everyone uncomfortable. And that's why, long after the pyro smoke cleared, the WWE Universe couldn't stop talking. Because they weren't just watching a return. They were watching a reckoning quietly begin.